hope everybody got to see the exhibit Church of Broken Pieces, and if you haven't, we're going to head up there after the Q&A. And so I think it will be a really great way to think about how these two works speak to each other, and we're going to do that now. But I wanted to ask first about context, about London. And to sort of, upstairs you were telling me a little bit about the relationship that the Black community has to a place like London is different than the relationship that the Black community has to places like Philadelphia, specifically Harlem, because we were looking at the exhibit upstairs, and just kind of the United States in general. So if you can set the stage a little bit for us and contextualize it, and maybe place yourself in London for us too.
Okay. I guess when we were talking about the differences, just on. Hello, yeah, there we go. I guess when we were talking about the differences, I was trying to make a distinction between, I guess, the concept of being African American and the concept of being a Black Brit, which is a much, in my opinion, a much looser term in the sense that it feels very multi-hyphenate in London. I was born and raised in London, but I'm Nigerian. And my friends are like either Ghanaian or they're from Trinidad or they're from Jamaica. It's like there's the connection to your actual home in a sense, and is very different. So London it always feels like 50% of London's an international city. 50% of the people in London you would argue, are minorities coming from different places. And from my perspective in my own family and my community, it always feels like we're in transition in London. Home is still very much Nigeria. I was born and raised in London, but it still feels like Nigeria's home. And I think many people who have that kind of globalized relationship reside in London in that kind of context. And therefore, the definition of what is a holistic Black British situation becomes a trickier question because of all the little nuances within that. So that's all I was trying to articulate, I guess, to some degree. And I'm Shawn can speak more on the African American experience on that sense, but there's a fracture, I would argue, in terms of this kind of concept of a collective Black Britishness, because we're all from different places, and we all are very connected to those different places, a lot of us.
Same question, sort of, in the context of Philadelphia.
To pick up where he left off, when I think of myself as an African American, and in the context of the history of America, I think of our continued displacement and our need to have a home, or to, as he said, home is Nigeria. We have sort of centers and ideals as home. Like we think of Harlem and what Harlem represents as home, or Chicago, St. Louis, and the things that emerge from there, jazz, art, the new Negro movement, things that are not necessarily tapped down so well that you can say this will always be home. And African Americans, in my opinion, through my experience, we are just starting to find home by utilizing technology. We're looking into our DNA so that we can have what he has. We know where our actual roots sort of are embedded. But Philadelphia is its own sort of emerging and always sort of changing space. And I see that in most of the cities that I visit, that African Americans are reaching back, looking backward, so that they can have a sure footing when they move forward. I see that a lot.
And so, Shawn, I guess I would ask you then how that leads you into looking into discovering, working on issues of displacement, gentrification, and how you sort of came to this particular project, the Church of Broken Pieces.
What I wanted to do was show that the city, in any city, it could be Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, these Black centers, these population centers, that there are tremendous amounts of beauty in our neighborhoods that's often overlooked or sort of given sort of wipe away, like, oh, they paint over everything. And I've heard things like this where, we use color to sort of identify things that you can't read from a distance. That's what Black folks do. You know what something is from a distance by the colors we utilize. And to me, that in itself is a beauty. That's a beautiful statement of culture. And it's more or less done unconsciously. So when I was doing street photography, I was discovering that pattern, that we were doing these things. And then I was like, wow, it would be great for me to create some sort of sense of mythology based on this reality. And I've been kind of moving forward through Church of Broken Pieces with the idea that the new mythology is Black reality, because there's not many people that outside of Black folks that care to know deeply about our reality. So it's a myth to everyone else. So Church of Broken Pieces is an exploration through certain characters that I've been utilizing subjects to allow them the freedom to move through my pieces and have transformational, poses and experience through those things. And what you see up there has a lot of connection to things of the past, like the New Negro movement. You'll see pieces that are representative of my influences, Bearden and Douglas and so forth.
And so to continue to follow that thread, Shola, I wanted to ask about coming to this film, A Moving Image. What was that process for you, both coming to the idea and then realizing it?
It was quite complex in the sense that I knew I had worked with the lead actress Tanya Fear before in a short film called Touch, so I knew the next project would involve her in some way, shape, or form. And the place I live in London is a place called Elephant and Castle. It's next to Peckham and Brixton, and I spent my youth pretty much in South London in those three areas. And the kind of process of gentrification in South London was for me was a bit slower. When we think of gentrification in London, we think of the epicenter of it. We think of Shoreditch in East London, which is like probably the hippest and still the hippest parts of London. Although now South London is Peckham and Brixton have very much picked up that kind of slack. And so seeing across the road from where I live an estate called the Haygate Estate, which was this huge mammoth estate, used to have 1,000 social homes. And it kind of got demonized as this kind of negative, brutalist structure. It was huge. And it started to appear in all these kind of crime shows. Like basically what would happen is if you needed somewhere that looked a bit dodgy or a bit like I think even Idris shot a few episodes of Luther. It was like in the Haygate, and so that estate was going through a long process of demonization and being called a sink estate. But unbeknownst to most people, there was a huge community there. And so what happened is that entire estate was knocked down, and then they rebuilt it. A private company rebuilt it. And essentially, you had 1,000 socially affordable homes, and now you only have 70, which is insane. And only 1 in 5 residents in that area, on that estate, got rehoused in the same area. Many got dispersed outside of London. You were hearing all sorts of crazy stuff, like old people having like heart attacks over the process of this social cleansing. And in a sense, it was probably the worst case of regeneration that I'm still aware of in terms of London. And it was like right on my doorstep, and it made me really it hammered home the idea of exploring this concept. But the actual second part of really following through was when I went to Harlem, actually. And then I realized I was screening films there, and I realized we were having the exact same conversations in Peckham and Brixton. They were the exact same conversations being had in Harlem and Brooklyn with my friends there. And I just felt like this is something that's a globalized thing, that if I make any work, I want to try and represent that kind of international perspective on it. And so when I got back to London, I started the process of making the film, and quickly found that I was going to a lot of meetings for the giant protests that you see Reclaim Brixton. It's a weird film in the sense that it's fictional, but then it merges with documentary and like photography and performance on other mediums. So that was a real event, and so I was going to a lot of the meetings to the build up to Reclaim Brixton, and seeing the kind of how people were trying to approach this event to tackle gentrification. And so that kind of changed the film in the sense that the film started to build around the documentary stuff, the real stuff that was happening. So it wasn't just like a straight linear fictional script. It was very much kind of immersive, collaborative experience where the fiction and documentary were responding to each other. And that led to, for me, that led to a greater truth than I could have ever written, just in a fictional sense. And also, it just meant that, real people in Brixton, like the lady who owns the shop, like who no longer, that shop shut down now, it doesn't exist. So it was that kind of element that really needed to be involved in the film, that the real elements, and then the fictional elements, and then that merging of all those kind of mediums is what made the film a reality, and much better for it, I think.
I certainly noticed that there was I called it a familiarity between your works. And you said it immediately when you came to see Shola. You said, oh, there's a duality. You called it a duality. And what Shola was just talking about, this kind of documentary and fiction and combining those two, you do something very similar. So I want to ask first, Shola, about your process of working with those two forms and how you made the decisions that you did in creating this film, using all of those, because there was also a little bit of music and a little, so there was kind of artistic stuff going on in there as well. And then your kind of transitionary use of what's fiction and what's documentary, and how you do that in your work as well.
I guess for me, it was the process just became it became very organic in a way that traditional films can be, but depending on what the budget of those films are, when you're making the film, because so much money is involved, there usually is a stricter structure of how you have to work and operate. Whereas this was very just wide open in terms of, once we shot Reclaim Brixton, we realized the whole thing had to change. It had to be up and open to changing. It had to be, you can't really, we went into that event 100% not knowing what would come out of it. And so when you're working in that type of way, you just have to be open and loose. Probably some of my favorite scenes in the film, like the performance of Big Ben that's like uncut. If that wasn't written, I don't know how you even put that into your script as a concept. Like, it was just on the fly. We had 2 takes, and he performed the whole song, and it just worked. And we didn't want to cut it. We wanted to have, because that's what very much it felt very real to what would happen in Brixton. You walk in Brixton. Brixton's a very musical place, and there's people playing music everywhere. Kind of like as I'm walking around Philly and I'm experiencing that. So like, the key was to be open and loose and allow the process to organically kind of guide where we were going. Any attempt to really dictate what the film would be was going to be a problem. It had to be so open and so free. And I think that was the kind of creative environment that I was trying to create, where everyone felt that they could contribute, and it was very open and very collaborative. And that's why you have the animation. That's why you have the performance art elements. That's why you have photography. The photographer the book she's reading is an old Brixtonian photographer called Neil Kenlock, who took lots of pictures of Brixton, kind of around the Brixton riots. And I was really interested in this kind of intergenerational discussion between, like, this kind of film kind of had to some degree a millennial-esque vibe, but I really wanted to have the kind of old guard people like Neil, who have been documenting and doing work in Brixton, also in conversation with myself about the themes. So again, that's just something you have to be open to. Neil delivered these amazing photos of situations in Brixton that were happening way before I was engaged in the topic, and it just really kind of slotted in with the process, and it's only because the process is open and it's free and it's loose. Again, if it's too restricted, it's a different type of film you're making. It's not quite the same thing. And I think that's the key. Is the process has to enable people to have a freedom and a flexibility.
Yeah, I couldn't actually tell if Big Ben was a scripted character or not.
That's good. Yeah. See, that's the whole point. You're not meant to really know. It kind of blurs in and out. You don't really know what's fact or what's fiction. That's really cool.
That was really cool.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Well, for me, my process starts with the intention of allowing people to see regular, everyday Black people sort of immortalized and made to be bigger than what they are on an everyday basis. So I go into neighborhoods knowing that I'll have my subject with me who's not, I don't like using professional models. Like I like getting to know my subjects and finding out about what they can add to the story when it comes time for me to talk about what this photo's about or what their storyline is about. It becomes part of the narrative when you can actually say, this is a person who's actually invested a great deal into themselves. So that's at the tail end that I always kind of think about those things. But when you have that in spaces that are under attack by the media, that this is a bad neighborhood, or you have people that want to sort of shrink the neighborhood down in one way or another. When you're able to have people from the neighborhood gravitate towards you because you have someone who is definitely not of the neighborhood, but representative of the best of Blackness and that sort of Black excellence, that's the thing that I look to actually have happen. I'll start my shoots and I'll get everyone sort of positioned and in where they should be, but I like to wait for people. Like it always happens. You get I call it helicoptering. You'll see people start sort of making the rounds around the block 2 or 3 times for whatever reason. They keep coming back around and they keep coming back around. And eventually I'd stop them, have conversation, and just kind of talk with them and engage because they want to know. And that natural curiosity to want to know, what are you doing in my neighborhood and why are you shooting him? That is to say that I value your neighborhood enough to actually perform my art here and then take it into the world. So part of my discussion, it leapfrogs from the importance of the neighborhood, the importance of the person, and then the overall importance of having this kind of encapsulated idea of Black excellence presented in these neighborhoods that are often maligned. And for me, that's been the key to be able to move forward into the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood or the next situation, because that kind of thing grows with reputation. So, I can move along block to block in certain areas and people will already know what's going on. Like, oh, I heard you were around here last week and yeah, Poppy up there, yeah, he told me. So then it's like you get this conversation going and then people come to visit you basically, that have already had this connection and they value it and they cherish it. And the thing is, I just want to see people have that value kind of like reinvested in themselves. Because when I take it to, like yesterday, I did a lecture at Temple and one of the young men, white guy, asked me a question, why do you focus on the good? Now, I'm from Philly, so I had to walk this back about 10 seconds before I literally was like, so I gave it back. I was like, well, why would you need me to focus on the bad? We got the news for that. We have your prejudice for that. We have bigotry for that. I'm here to combat that. Are you open to that? And that was the only kind of answer I could give. You want to see more poverty porn? Honestly, do you want to see more bad from, better yet, and I asked him, I was like, when you walk down the street with what you have in your mind right now, would you avoid me or would you feel safe enough to walk past me? And he had no answer. So I was like, this is why I do what I do. So you want bad, turn on channel 6. You want good, get on the gram. Come see me. You know?
So I actually want to come back to this point that you're touching on now and reconnect it with the film, because this is a film about an artist who's exploring this realm of social justice. And I think the elephant in the room that the activist Ahmed points out is, I think he says, art projects ain't shit. Mm-hmm. And here we are talking about a film and exhibits that are looking at displacement and gentrification. And so I'm curious about, for both of you, where you might see your role in the world of this film that we just saw, and what are you pushing forward? What are you, what are the purposes behind the vision of this art that you're creating?
Try to slide that one. No, I think the reason, like the Ahmed character in the film, I think I have to know at the start that I think my lead character, Nina's psychosis, kind of mirrors my own behind the camera. So it's kind of like we're in a conversation about whether or not art actually means anything in the context of real social trauma. And I think I'm always pushing myself to really, I mean, that's a question that always burns, particularly who really benefits from depictions of social trauma. Can art actually really make a difference in these things? And I think that's really, going into this project and exploring gentrification, I think I was really questioning myself, and I think that's why it appears in the film. That's why a lot, there's a film in a film kind of quality, even though she's making like a visual art project. There's a real mirroring of similar questions about the value of art and the process of art in gentrification and complicity. So I like to think that by confronting those things head on and having them in the film, that's actually a way of trying to break through and make some sort of change on that. By acknowledging, as a creative, as a filmmaker, I get that there's a level of complicity in my involvement, and I get that certain people. The film didn't stop Batil's shop from being shut down. It didn't stop all the arches from closing. And I guess I'm still looking, and I'm still on this kind of perennial search for work that really makes an impact, that really can, start a riot or really do some serious shit. And I don't think I've found it, but it's what the journey is for me, I think, and my work will always be trying to push to find that moment where I'm like, this is it.
For me, art is a weapon, and it's a weapon that's used to attack understandings and intelligence and opinion. So I look at the idea of art being a place where, for us, we aren't very well represented within the art world. And if anybody's been keeping up with the news from the Whitney Biennial, that's more evident now than ever. Discussions about Black identity, Black purpose, and Black bodies and Black service within those spaces is important, because we have to distinguish our identities separately from so much of what is going on, so that we have to actually say, this is the whole Black body that I'm presenting, and this art matters, and I need you to think about it critically, because it is a product of everything I know. So even though we might have all these very distinct, distilled understandings of Blackness from all these different angles, we have to utilize art as a weapon first to sort of attack intellect. And that's why I love having my work in places where it challenges people's thinking. because they don't know what the hell I'm doing. What is this? Is fashion? Is this collage? Is this? Is that? I want you to think about form and how I form factor everything in, but then get down to the message in it. And then that's where I see a lot of the conversation begin. It's either that, like, I think art as a weapon is a start for all sorts of revolution, because every revolution has had its art as propaganda. We haven't reached that point, but I do believe art being utilized as a weapon is important, particularly for us now, because we're doing our best to not go in a direction of, true revolution where we're all out there like, okay, we give up, we're just gonna go do what we have to do. I think you're seeing more Black artists now because that frustration is being raised up so high that it's forcing people to put so much of this frustration out in a creative way before they take the next step. It's asking of someone who wouldn't listen to you to at least look at you. And that to me is why I do what I do. Because I know people don't listen, but you can't not see something,
That's a perfect segue to talk about the aesthetics of both of your works. And I think that if you guys want to ask each other questions about, because we found out you inspired a musician who then you used in the film, and you two didn't know that until a few hours ago. So I think first, because you mentioned it, I think first if we can talk a little bit about the visuals, and you both use these backdrops, a lot of backdrops, very colorful, very bright, and I think what you're foregrounding is a little bit different. But tell us a little bit about these steel, what are they called? The industrial
shutters.
Doors, the shutters, the walls, all of those things. And you both kind of made those aesthetic choices separately in these very different mediums.
But for me, I use shutters in my last body of work, The Avenues, to indicate movement, to actually discuss this translocation and micro migrations of Black folks in the neighborhoods as they're being displaced. So the shutters for me was a way to sort of, with my cinematographer mind, is giving you the idea that movement is happening. So whenever I utilize shutters in these neighborhoods, these were neighborhoods where most of the gentrification is happening. So if you revisit that work, most of that shutter work is like gone, or they're repainted, or they're Lego houses now, And I love how shutters. All right, I'm just gonna say I love shutters.
There's that too.
Yeah, just gonna get that out there. I love the geometry that it creates, and as a photographer, I love a nice level line. So it gives me an easy way to create the things that I want. But when I started to see the things that were impacting the neighborhood, it was the most simple way to convey that tension and that movement. And when you can get somebody moving quickly across shutters, and you tend to look at people's faces. I don't know about it for you, but when people are on the street and they're walking and they have this, they take this sort of, I call it the question mark body language, and they're just very intent. Those lines are drawn in the backdrop. They're drawing straight into the face. So it makes the viewer look at the emotion of the person versus just the backdrop that's just plain slate or so. But
so many landscape as character is super important. And the film I made before a moving image was a short film called Touch. It was in a very rural setting, Lincolnshire, very flat kind of space. Very open, not many things on the horizon, and it was all about using that landscape to tell that story. So once in Brixton, it became very clear that the film had to have this kind of kinetic energy and movement, this constant idea of rhythm, movement. Because when you come out of Brixton Station, like the start of the film, you're bombarded with sounds, images, and it's all very hectic, and it's buskers, everything. And I wanted to capture that just kinetic movement throughout, to have that in the film, and maybe not use it at certain points, but generally as a motif for the film, movement and energy was super important. I'm a big fan of like long, deep depth of field. And I think what it is with the shutters and the geometry of like walls and stuff, I think it's symmetry. I like symmetrical things, and I think when you're combining the depth of field with this kind of this texture and this symmetry, it really there's just a language that you can create in that. You're using those tools, that palette, to just convey whatever your emotional charge is at the moment or in the scene. And the whole time while making this film, the key concept was to subvert the traditional kind of, I guess, almost British film stereotype, which is when you make a film about something that's quite problematic, that you douse everything in like gray skies and it's all kind of monochromatic and sad and dour, which is a real thing. It's like brick grit. It's a real thing. And I'm like, there is a way to tackle a sad and kind of problematic subject. Isn't the same to have to like make it monochromatic. I think there's a way to tackle these kind of social issues and retain the kind of brightness and the energy and the colors that is Brixton. Like, I think I would have been doing super disservice to the space if I had done that and made this kind of very like gray sky type of film. It wouldn't have been true to the energy of Brixton. So it had to have energy, the colors had to be there, and we're dealing with black skin against all of these really like just sexy colors, like the yellows, the oranges, and all this. Finding all of that in Brixton was super important to the film. But movement and energy was one of the key things that had to come out. It had to have that kind of kinetic pace and rhythm to it, as well as in tune with the character, in tune with the music, and in tune with that kind of action.
And the music, too, is another part of the aesthetic that I wanted to ask about. In film, it's so much a part of the emotion and how we're going to feel. Your exhibit doesn't have, auditory sound that you're hearing while you're walking through it, but there is music in those images. And on your Instagram, you have the same kind of setup, but one of your subjects is sort of like dancing around something, and there's music, and so tell us a little bit about music and yeah.
This is the first body of work that I've made without a score, because typically I will make a body of work and exhibit it with a score included. And this one, I wanted it to be a little bit more of I wanted you to explore your feelings and your thoughts without any kind of rhythm to it. But I think music is so incredibly important to the creation of what we both do, because even if it's not something that's immediately like put together in the content and sort of there for you to experience along with the viewing aspect, you have it in your head. You have some sort of beat and bop going when you're making it, and it might just be this subconscious rhythm that you look for. And I know I have it all the time. Like, I'll have something in my head that I want, but I absolutely love having music created around the body of work. That's something that I've done for the past 3 or 4 years, and then I'll put out these little short vignettes of the dancers moving to certain pieces and moving along with the emotions that it might be me. It might be my need to see my emotions come to life. Not necessarily something that I'm trying to explain about the external audience or my external subject. Sometimes those pieces are just about where I'm at, so that I can let people know like where I'm going next. Like, that is an important key to sort of shift the mood. A lot of times I use music and dance, and I'm no choreographer or musician, but I know a few, and they kind of get what my aesthetic is with that, and I'll reach out and have them sort of make a body of work for me for each one. But this is the one that I haven't done yet. Or should I say, I don't know. I don't think I'll ever do one for this one. Like, I think I'm just going to skip this one and let it kind of be what it is, you know.
Why are you so inclined with this one, or not so inclined?
It just, some of the things that you'll see in this body of work has to do with what the viewer is interpreting. And there are pieces where there are deep silhouettes that's not about the subject in the photo, it's about what you are seeing back in your reflection. I want you to see yourself, literally see yourself in the image and sort of feel whatever is coming out of you from this connection with this piece. I don't want to drive that in any way, and music as rhythm is a driving factor. I like that, I've been in the museum. Since this has been up, I've been in the museum almost every weekend, either announced or unannounced, just kind of like hanging out and watching people. And some of y'all probably know, because I probably have seen some of y'all. But I like watching people look at a piece for much longer than normal, or then come back to it again and like, did I see what I thought I saw? Like, that kind of thing to me, I like watching that because I have to study that to figure out what I'm going to do next. You know, watching that human reaction to, like, I thought I was looking at art, but all of a sudden it becomes this meta moment where they're sort of self-analyzing, you know, their current state of mind, and you see it. You see, you know, people are happy to kind of like stroll around, but then they have this emotional moment where they stop and they freeze, and then they pull their phone out. And then they're trying to capture what they're seeing, and I like that moment. You know, I really like seeing that emotional reaction to it. So music couldn't add anything to that human behavior. I love that, you know.
I thought you were going to say you walk up to those people and knock the phones out of them.
No, I don't mind. Take as many pictures as you want. Let everybody know. Please.
Shola, the music in your film, you had drums, you had live performances, and then you had backdrop music, you had dance competitions. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I always joke with my composer, like, that essentially I'm just like a film musician who makes films. Like, I'm a super big fan of music, and I'm a big fan of directors who really know what to do with music in films. I think with this film, in creating the score, and I wish Shagan was here to talk about it, we went through various iterations of what we thought the sound for the film would be, and like most of the development of the film, it became very organic. Again, in Brixton's an area where, particularly where it's the Caribbean community who are influenced that, you know, it's the Eddie Grant, Electric Avenue type of space. And we could have done that. We could have made it all sound kind of like calypso, or kind of put it into that vein. But I felt like the film needed to try and find its own score. It needed to find its own melody. It needed to find its own sonics. And we pretty much moved away from that kind of idea of that kind of representational music, and we just tried to isolate scenes and start through the character to find the music and the rhythm, the edits, the rhythm, the pace, and that's how we kind of got this kind of futuristic electronic soul score, which I think is what we were. It wasn't what we had in mind at the start, but that's what came out organically, just through really working through the images, the characters, and the organic music. The song that the character Big Ben plays, you know, what's really interesting about that is Yinka, the guy who plays that character, had that song before the film even existed, about Brixton and Brooklyn, and he's a musician. And the way he got cast was actually, I just bumped into him at Tesco's, which is our local shopping center. And I remember seeing him.
You're giving away all the Big Ben secrets.
I know, but like, hey. Because it's a weird one. He really is that guy, but he's playing that guy. So, so it's really, you know, whether again you can still maintain whether it's real or fake in that sense, but it's only through casting him that we got that song. And not every person can play a guitar without a cut for 3.5 minutes and put in such a soulful performance. So the sound, the sonics for the music was for the film was super important, and I'm very happy to actually, I haven't seen the film for a long time, but to just listen to the music and the evolution of it throughout the film, and it was a real process, and it was really about me collaborating with Segun Akinola, an amazing young Nigerian composer, and really finding the sound of the film organically instead of transposing an idea of what the sound should be. We just let the film kind of tell its own score in a sense.
Okay, one more question for me, and then we'll go to the audience. You mentioned characters, and Shawn, your piece upstairs, your exhibit, The Church of Broken Pieces, is pretty character-driven. There's a lot going on with things that you've created. It's a little less street photography. I don't know. You can say no, but it's scripted, or at least many of the photographs are scripted. And you've created these characters, and you really speak to the audience. There's a narration that's in all the titles, and I think Shola, you created this really interesting character who. She's sort of struggling with the personal and the political and the artistic, and and that question that I asked earlier about politics and art, and then also the personal, because it's very difficult for her to talk about her personal struggles with depression, and then that becomes a part of the story. And so, yeah, I don't want to elaborate more on these characters, but I'm interested in how you both are creating the characters for these works, and tying it back into the political work that you're doing with this art as well.
Well, for me, I take from a lot of Black literature, Black movies, and I like to find protagonists that speak to greater sort of ideals of Blackness, or I just love sort of seeing interpretation around archetypes a lot of times. So I have my Invisible Man character that obviously evolved from the book Invisible Man, and we utilize, I like to push that character outside of the book, or outside of your understanding of who he was in the book. And that kind of gave me a format to start. That was the first character I created, and it meant a lot because it was really, people gravitated toward him, even though they could never really see him. He's this deeply silhouetted, tall gentleman who happens to be in the audience, right over there. Say hi, Jason. Hey, there you go. That's my Invisible Man guy right there. I then started to look at other characters that I could put into storylines, visual storylines, and create these moments along the way for people to wait for them. It's not like a page turner where you're literally reading a book, you get a caption, you get an image, and then there might be 4 weeks between that character's next sort of, moment in my timeline. So when I started to think about Church of Broken Pieces, I thought about the collision of this created space, a real space, and then what would happen in a probable space of that collision, like the merging of those two and the product of that. And that's what it all is. It's just seeing these characters sort of move forward in these different scenes. And I don't think I'll ever stop doing that. And professionally, I've wanted to sort of redefine what street photography is, because I thought it was a bit flat. Just sort of run. For every city, there's a style of street photography. New York has its style, which is kind of run and gun. Philly has its style, which is kind of fun and, sort of eccentric.
Philly's fun and eccentric.
Yeah, it is. But I wanted to remove the idea that street photography had to be tied to location or your understanding of geographically, this is where we are. So, I've had people come into the exhibition like, wow, what part of Africa did you shoot all this in? And that, okay,
Or it could be somewhere in the Caribbean, too.
I've heard Cuba. Cuba and Africa seem to be the two dominant ones. And it's successful in one way, and in other ways, it's kind of like, this is in your backyard, basically. Like, this color, this beauty, all these things are happening. And then when you tell people, like, I specifically tell people, like, that's this intersection, or that's, like, I like to engage with the audience about where they live, and I say, oh, this piece over here was done in your neighborhood. Where? It's this sort of disbelief that I love to, like, show them, like, yeah, your neighborhood's beautiful, and I was there, and I did something worthwhile. And I'm also telling a story and I'm telling the story in the way that keeps your neighborhood alive. I don't know, I just don't want to do what everyone else does, because, it just kind of, it's a chorus in a way. I look at it as this is sort of the solo moment where you actually have to focus in and really kind of listen to what that soloist is singing before you go to everything else. That's for my work, that's what I see.
There's something beautiful too about not knowing that makes this diasporic connection kind of much more obvious.
That's the important part for me. I want people to feel those connections. When you remove those geolocations and the markers and the landscapes, people are more connected than not, because the guesswork means that they're thinking and they're imagining, well, where could this be? And it gets them to stick into it a little longer. Yeah.
So for me, I guess, because of the kind of multimedia approach to the film, there's the real life, there's the research that's informing the characters, the time spent just meeting people around the gentrification kind of debate and going to these meetings and the rallies. And then I think like every film I've made, there's an element of spirituality in this film. Mm-hmm. And the Big Ben character is a symbolic representation of Brixton itself. And I think that character is so important for me in the film, because I think you really, through my lead, through Tanya, through her character Nina, you get a sense of her struggle, but I think you get the sense of the place's struggle through him as well. And so that character was super important for me. And Nina herself is based on my producer, Rinki Ato, who was born and raised in Brixton, left, returned, found it a very different place. And just her experiences found their way into that character. And then the rest is Tanya. I personally like to cast or work with people who are the characters to some degree. And then we build together, we collaborate. And particularly on a film like A Moving Image, where everything's kind of, you're merging with reality anyway. Everything's kind of real in that sense. So it was super important not really to go out and find actors, but to cast people who have the skills and the talent, but are so close and have that personal relationship to the subject as well. So a lot of the cast of people I already knew, who I'd collaborated with before, who I knew weren't too far from the characters they were portraying. If not in very fact, they were the characters they were portraying to some degree. And I liked to build the character with them. I like to collaborate to find the nuances of the character with them. Again, it's trying to avoid this whole kind of transposing these ideas on the subject and letting it organically form from conversations and collaboration. I think some people sometimes are afraid of that because it's like you can't control it. But my favorite moments in the films are the moments where they've been a complete surprise.
Thank you. Okay, audience question.
Thank all three of you for coming out today. I really appreciate you guys, the art that you've taken and using that thoughtful art to have a thoughtful conversation. So starts all the way back 600 years, whenever the first slave ship came to Africa, came from Africa, displacing people. And then you see the same thing with segregation. You see the same thing with redlining, as far as people coming back and trying to buy homes. Now you see it again with gentrification. So it's been hundreds of years of this continuous cycle. So kind of stepping away from the art and using that as the catalyst to start having action behind these conversations. What would you say from where you are, being subject matter experts on what you are? How do we start taking steps to break that cycle for my generation, the generation coming behind me, and then to start building an actual geographical home world?
I've thought about this a lot. And the one thing that I believe that we have to do is concern ourselves with wealth building. Because with wealth and being able to hand it down generation to generation, you are empowering the next generation to be able to combat their opponents, the people who are, real estate is a competition, and being able to have the buying power to purchase and stay on land is important. So for the things that I'm doing now, like my work, none of it is for me. Like none of the work that I create is under my name. It's all under my daughter's name. Things like that have to happen in every one of our households, where you have to think forward and away from yourself to be able to say, hopefully, this can create some kind of wealth that will last generation to generation to generation, and it has to build, and you have to think and learn about what it is to be in that space of controlling wealth versus being in the moment and of trend and buying into and wasting the money. As much money as Black people, like to spend, we have to start thinking about wealth management. And also making sure that when we do this wealth management strategy that we are spending money with each other, because that's the only way that collectively it begins to grow. So those are the two things that I can say that I know I'm personally doing that I hope, could expand and sort of touch everyone else and influence people. I'm incredibly concerned about that right now. I think about it literally every day. I'm hopeful that my friends, when I'm complaining to them about it, that they do these things too with their children, because we may not reach that platitude within our lifetimes. So why not plan for the life that we've brought in to be able to do that, and the life that they beget, and so on and so on. We have to really start thinking more we have this terrible past, this millennia of hardship. So what do we do going a millennia forward? Because we can keep looking back, and it's there. It's always going to be there. That knife never is going to be pulled out of our backs, but we have to start thinking forward. What do we do? And it comes with that. For me, that's what it comes from.
No, I agree. I also think two things. One, I'm no expert. I just have a strong perspective on these things. But I feel that was much more of a question for you as well from an African American perspective, because again, my history is very different, and I 100% agree with everything you said. Saying that, I just think it's what I'm interested in is the collective power of the diaspora. Because I think African Americans, Black people in Europe, Black people on the continent, I think the diaspora, and when I say that, I mean African Americans and Black people in Europe, have to also be more vigilant with actually what's going on the continents, but invest some time and energy understanding the kind of different complex, nuanced situations happening there. Because I think it's that type of work that will enable us to collectively, globally, connect. Because we know there are differences. Samuel L. Jackson recently showed there are differences,
Yes.
and it's a very, when talking about displacement, my parents just immigrated. They weren't displaced. They immigrated to the UK, like many people in the West Indies, and they were already middle class and wealthy, and they came thinking that Britain would be super dope, and it wasn't that great in comparison to where they came from. So it's a much trickier question for me to answer, but I agree with everything that Shawn said, and I'm just personally interested in how we connect globally. I'm always looking back to Nigeria, Lagos, as well as London, and as well as the US.
I don't think what I wanted to say is as much a question as when you mentioned how you're defining in your mind your own family and your daughter, and it just made me think of a family that I know that we're talking lived in one of those neighborhoods where you would not expect quote unquote to see the beauty, but they had neighbors and they had a solid community. And I'm thinking that the head of the family, the father, bought the house that was next to him, and then the house on the other side, and the house where his mother lived, which was across the street. And then he gave each of his children one of those houses. And so we're talking about over a span of 30 years or so, the area has begun to change, but his children have homes. All of his children have homes. And he stayed and is solid in that area. And for some reason that feels really positive that he had the foresight. And this is a man with little means, but he felt a certain power and a certain value. And I guess the other thing is hard for me to think about gentrification without thinking about the politics and the economics, so that we have to be involved on many different levels. So I'm thinking about, I've been in Philadelphia, but when people want to be close to the center city, and they're out in the suburbs, they literally come back in and they move the people out. But at one point, they, didn't want to be, and they moved the people out to the suburbs. So it's about power and, I don't know, just collective politics, empowerment. I guess all of those are all the things that come to my mind when I think about this issue, working solidly. And then we're talking about on an international level, but all of those issues come up from the
And structures and systems too. It's pretty big. Yeah. Questions? Oh, we'll go here.
First of all, thank you both for your work. For the film, at the end, she decides not to stay in Brixton. And when I was in seminary, there was a sort of question of like, what would be the black middle class response to gentrification? So I'm just curious, are you quietly saying that certain people really do need to not be part of the problem? Because she's a gift, she's a blessing and a burden by coming back.
Yeah.
That space was pretty nice. So I'm just really curious about her not staying there. Like, were you trying to say something?
No, I think I like with the film. All the films I make, I like them to be really. I like audiences to come to it and be able to pick them apart and interpret what they've seen, however they want to interpret it. I think one of the key things with Nina as a character, as a woman of color, gentrifying. I think it was kind of follows on from the question, your answer actually about poverty porn and these sort of things. I think one of the more interesting stories I heard about gentrification in Harlem was like wealthy Africans displacing African Americans, like wealthy Africans from the continent, like moving to Harlem because of its long history, wanting to be a part of that, using that like Nigerian or real African money to make that happen, and the kind of complexity of that situation, because it's gentrification, but it's a black person. But how's that? The nuances of that, and I think if there's anything I took away from it, it's the fact that it's really interesting to see a black person in such a privileged position on screen, not in a poverty porn sense. Someone with affluence, someone with some authority and power. And yes, she's in this conundrum where she now has to navigate that because she's part of a problem. But isn't that interesting just to see a black female character in that position in the film? So I don't think it's a thing where it's negative that she had to leave. I think it's a thing where we all have to acknowledge our positions in a space, and in doing so, we might be confronted with stuff that we can either take or stuff we don't really want to handle for whatever reason. And I think that's more of the position. I think it's very much an open ending in that sense. It ends on a question because it's very much about us all questioning our own complicity in the process in whatever spaces that we reside in.
I think the contrast to that happening, that character too, was the Mickey, the white guy character, who just got so, at the sound of social cleansing, just shut down. He just shut it down. Yeah, that was it. I think one more question. Yes.
Get to know your neighbors. Yeah. That's a big deal. Don't walk down the street with blinders on. Black folks are very loving, compassionate, and friendly group of people if you say hello. When you walk past us and, if you're a new neighbor and you just kind of like, you move in on a block, there's structure there. And know that everybody else is looking at you, waiting for you to make your first move. So if you walk off the block without don't do that. Get to know. Because you're inheriting a family. When you move into a black neighborhood or a brown neighborhood or a yellow neighborhood, know that they've been there for a generation. Know that they know everybody and everything that's happened. And know that everyone's looking to see what you're going to contribute to that. Because we have open doors. We have an open door policy when it comes to being neighborly, if we see it first. Just be friendly. And that's a really great place to start, because you don't need to ask us, you need to talk to your neighbor. That's who you need to be talking to. No doubt.
Any more? I'm just going to break the rule. Any more? Questions? Sheena.
Thank you both for your exhibit.
Thank you.
I thought the humanizing of godliness was so captured, right? Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And in the film too, I found myself laughing. I found myself just really touched by connecting to the characters. So my question is completely different, but you brought up Mickey's character, and it reminded me that I was thinking about Brexit, right? And the politics of that scenario we're in right now. And just, I don't know if you can talk about, thinking about the concept of Brexit and, what it means, because I don't live there, and I was just thinking about Mickey's character and, how defensive he got, and, the way in which he was kind of claimed this working class white status. But at the same time, the way in which he was so defensive and resisting any connection to his role in gentrification, and what that means for the politics of displacing immigrants coming in.
The broader history of the United Kingdom, basically.
Colonization.
The world we live in.
I can't even just shift that to short to just try
Can't pass that one up.
Well, I'll try to look at them and to kind of separate that. I don't want to conflate the two, gentrification and Brexit, because they're two, in a way, they're two separate things. I actually made a short film that was at Sundance about, it was called Dear Mr. Shakespeare. It's a reinterpretation of Othello, and was a collaboration with me and a really cool visual artist called Phoebe Boswell. And it's actually on, you can watch it on Vimeo, it's on YouTube. And that was actually her musings about it kind of encompasses more of the stuff about Brexit and that sort of situation. Looking at Mickey and him being, he's a very complex character because he is a white working class character who's come good. So he's a working class lad who's done good, made some money, and again finds himself now in a situation where he's a problem because he's using that money to move into an area that is not a lot of people can do in that sense. And I think that I wanted him to be as complex as that. I think it would have been too simple to just have you could have gone the route where you just had a rich, Oxford or Etonian educated young white guy who's just bumbling in. It's like, oh, I like Hugh Grant or some shit. And that would have just been dumb. I think there's a complexity to white working class and black relations in the UK in itself, from punk era to and into reggae and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's Brexit as its own thing it has a duality of people who were there's the anti-immigrant thing, but people who just like people in America who wanted to give the establishment a bloody nose, people in the UK who wanted to give the metropolitan elite, as they say, a bloody nose and take back their country from Brussels and bureaucrats, European bureaucrats, and all of that stuff. So many people who voted Brexit will tell you they're not racist or they're not anti-immigrant. They just want to control their own country, and that's a valid. I think it's a bit it lacks nuance to say everyone who voted Brexit is racist and anti-immigrant. But saying that, a large proportion I'm sure statistically, I don't want to make any kind of broad claims, but what's funny for me is that when I was in London, I didn't see one Leave campaigner the whole time I was in London during the build-up to Brexit. I didn't see a Leave campaigner till I left London, and then so in my mind it wasn't going to happen. But that's the thing, you're in that London bubble, and you have to realize that London's so different from the rest of the UK. And Brexit again is as well as being a bloody nose to the British elite, it's a bloody nose to London as well, because what London is as this kind of and it always has been, this historical international city that has wealth. Not everyone feels a part of that. And so some people who were Brexiting were railing against that too. It's a super complex situation, and I don't want to make any comments on it where I'm not 100% on. I just know there's so many layers to it. How I feel personally about it, my concern is moving forward. I think there were some interesting things in the Constitution, the European Constitution, about human rights that we kind of need to hold on to as an independent nation now. And I'm not the biggest Tory supporting government person in that sense. So I don't know. I hope personally that we can get a government that. Maybe Labour, maybe under Jeremy Corbyn, that can protect the NHS, can protect all of these things that working class, middle class Brits really need. These services that came in post World War II that were really about holistically looking after a nation that look like they're now disappearing. So there's just a lot of layers to Brexit that you need a real British historian to tell you about.
Yeah, and that all sounds really familiar, unfortunately, right now. Thank you both. Thank you, Shawn Theodore, Shola Amoo. Thank you so much. I just want to do a really quick plug. Blackstar Film Festival, if you love Black independent cinema and Black art, is going to be August 3rd through August 6th this year. Blackstarfest.org. Also, if you're a filmmaker and you want to submit to Blackstar, the deadline is April 23rd. So keep those in mind. come upstairs. There's music and like really great stuff.
Yeah, check out Shawn's. It's a really amazing exhibition.
And Shawn's exhibit, yes. Thank you.